my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to The Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthhour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed, so you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Elizabeth, and she's going to be sharing her unmedicated hospital birth story, which she described as a dreamy birth. She also talks about her postpartum struggles. This episode is sponsored by Cozy Earth. We're coming up on February, and whether you're super into celebrating Valentine's Day or not, we can all agree it's a month to indulge in some coziness. That's why I'm really excited about Cozy Earth's Valentine's BOGO offer on their viral pajama sets. Their pajamas are all breathable, soft, and nursing friendly, so they are a perfect gift for yourself or another mom in your life. Whether you go with the bamboo or the Sutton 100% cotton option, you're going to love the lightweight, comfortable fit. I love that I never overheat in Cozy Earth pajamas, and I really lived in them during pregnancy and postpartum. Plus, with a 100-night sleep trial, you can try them out, and if you don't love them, return them hassle-free. But trust me, you won't want to. All of their products come with a 10-year warranty as well, which is truly amazing. These viral PJs are so good that they sold out during the holidays, and now they're back with an exclusive deal available January 25th through February 8th. Check out their bamboo and Sutton pajama collection at cozyearth.com. Use my code BIRTHHOURBOGO, BIRTHHOURBOGO, to get these PJs for you and someone you love. And if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth right here on The Birth Hour. Celebrate everyday love with comfort that makes the little moments count. Today's episode is brought to you by Air Doctor. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors, but did you know that indoor air can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air? You can breathe easy with Air Doctor, the award-winning air purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. Air Doctor was voted Best Air Purifier by Newsweek, so it's no surprise that 98% of Air Doctor customers agree their home's air feels cleaner, safer, and healthier. Unlike other purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters. We have air purifiers in our bedroom as well as the kids' bedrooms, and everyone has been sleeping better. I love how quiet the Air Doctor is. It's like the perfect amount of white noise. I would absolutely splurge on this for a nursery for baby. Like, get the cheap crib from IKEA and put your money towards this so that your baby has clean air in their nursery. We also have one in our living room, and I've noticed a huge difference after cooking and things like that. It just really clears the room really quickly. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use the promo code BIRTHHOUR to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty, which is an $84 value for free. You can get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com, airdoctorpro.com, using the promo code BIRTHHOUR. All right, let's hear from Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me. This is a dream come true. After sharing happiness and heartbreak with all the women who have shared their birth stories before me, it is an honor to tell my own story.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to hear it. And before we get to that story, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
My name is Elizabeth, or Lizzie. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a registered nurse in a pediatric ICU in Wisconsin. My husband's name is Shane, and we've been together for 11 years, married for 5. We have a 4-year-old golden retriever named Nash and our now 4-month-old daughter, Sophie.
All right, we're going to hear Sophie's story today. So why don't you just start us off with getting pregnant and how your pregnancy went?
We always knew we wanted to have children, but never felt like it was the right time to start trying. I thought having the hormonal IUD for 10 years could affect my fertility, so I had it removed about a year before I got pregnant, and we started natural family planning. My cycle was very regular, and we knew exactly when I would ovulate each month. Knowing the odds of getting pregnant on the first cycle was rare, we decided to not use protection and just see what would happen. 4 weeks later, I had a positive pregnancy test. The morning I found out, I was actually going to the walk-in for concerns of pneumonia and knew they'd likely want to take an x-ray. I thought there was no way I was pregnant, but on the off chance I could be, I should take a test before going in. I had one left at home and quickly took it before running out the door. Somehow, there appeared to be 2 lines on it. I hardly had time to take in this information. I remember hearing that blue dye tests have a higher inaccuracy rate, so I thought that must be what was happening. On my way home from the clinic, I grabbed a pink dye and digital test just to be sure. Of course, those came back positive as well. I waited for what felt like an eternity for Shane to come home from work so I could share this crazy news. Although we knew what we were doing, we were both shocked that I was actually pregnant. We were fortunate for it to happen so quickly and immediately knew that this was the right time for us to start a family. Nash became really clingy around this time too. Looking back, I think he might have known I was pregnant before we did. We found out the week before Christmas and tried to keep it a secret through the family celebrations because we were still taking it in ourselves. We told our families the following week right away with a fake lottery ticket that we're all winners and a prize box that said, "We're having a baby." They seemed just as surprised as we were, even though they had been asking for it since we got married years earlier. Ultimately, everyone was excited to have the first grandbaby on both sides of our family. As far as planning goes, I've always wanted an unmedicated birth, so we hired a doula to help support me during labor. The resource that enlightened me the most was listening to the Birth Hour podcast for the last 5 years.
Oh, I love to hear that.
I learned so much just from listening to women share their stories. I wanted to know and prepare for all possibilities that could happen. Shane and I also took the Know Your Options birth course, which we found to be really helpful. We watched The Business of Being Born, and I read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, which were less educational but more empowering. I skimmed The Birth Partner and noted a few sections for Shane to look through to help support me in labor. I also read Emily Oster's books, Expecting Better and Crib Sheet. These were factual and relatively boring reads, but helped me make informed decisions throughout my pregnancy, labor, and even the first few months of my daughter's life. My pregnancy went pretty much as expected. My first symptoms were breast tenderness, overheating, and nausea. I was always hot even though it was the middle of winter. I was nauseous from week 6 to week 16, which felt like forever. I only got sick twice, so it could have been worse, but going to work and eating was difficult. I remember one evening I asked Shane to pick up bourbon chicken and crumble cookie because I was finally hungry, and by the time he got home, I was too nauseous to eat any of it. I lived on fruit and body armor during this time. I was taking Unisom and Zyrtec every night before bed too. I'd periodically skip a night thinking I didn't need them anymore, but I would feel off the next day, so I continued taking them until delivery. When I looked back at my pregnancy book in preparation for this podcast, I wrote that I couldn't believe I was being tortured by a blueberry, which is how big she was at the time. We took a family trip to Mexico when I was 10 weeks pregnant, and shockingly, it was the only week of my first trimester where I could eat without feeling nauseous. The moment we arrived back in Wisconsin, I felt sick again. Just before the trip, we had our first appointment. It went well, but I had a high blood pressure reading because I was extremely anxious. Our OB was incredible, though. The visits were relatively short, but we always had our questions answered, and she gave us a hug each time. A few weeks later, our dog Nash helped us reveal her gender by eating a cake with pink frosting inside it. That was the best day of his life. Sharing our pregnancy was really exciting, but the response I got from most people when I told them I wanted an unmedicated birth was disappointing. I received surprised facial expressions and comments like, "Just wait until you feel the pain," or "I could never do that," and even, "Your husband is okay with that?" Although my husband and doula were my biggest cheerleaders, it would have been nice to receive support and encouragement from others too. The second trimester was a sweet spot, as people say. I could eat again, my bump started showing, and I overall felt great. I finally could feel her moving around 20 weeks. From that moment, she didn't stop squirming and kicking inside of me. Shane and I went on a baby moon at a lakeside cabin to enjoy our time together before everything was about to change. I remember sitting by the fire and crying because I was so worried about how it would affect our marriage. Looking back now, our relationship is different, but I didn't have anything to worry about. The third trimester was also good for the most part. Our families threw us an incredible baby shower on what happened to be one of the hottest days of summer. We received over 2,000 diapers for our raffle, which helped immensely after our daughter was born. I prepared several freezer meals so we wouldn't have to worry about cooking right away too. One thing I found annoying is the amount of people who asked how long I was going to work for. It seemed like a shock that I was working up until my due date, but I wanted to save my leave for after she was actually born. The last month of pregnancy is when I really started to become uncomfortable. I had significant acid reflux, and Tums became my best friend. I felt short of breath all the time. I had a lot of back, hip, and pelvic pain too. I was seeing a chiropractor and massage therapist, which helped for a few days, but not long term. I stayed active and spent most evenings doing exercises on my yoga ball. I wasn't sleeping quite as well and getting up multiple times at night to go to the bathroom. Working as an ICU nurse was exhausting at this point too. In hindsight, I wish I had taken at least a week off before my due date. I also commute an hour to and from work, and everyone was concerned I'd go into labor there. But I felt confident I could make it home if that happened. Around 37 weeks, I frustratingly got a cold, but thankfully I recovered quickly. When my GBS test came back negative, it felt like all the stars were aligning for me to have the birth I wanted. At 38 weeks, I started eating dates and drinking red raspberry leaf tea. At my 39-week appointment, I was 1 centimeter dilated and 50% effaced. Shane started giving me perineal massages. I was doing a lot of curb walking. Nash didn't like those walks very much. I tried pumping and saw my first few drops of colostrum. I also lost my mucus plug over 2 days. At 39 and 5, I had a breakdown about not wanting to be pregnant anymore. I told my manager during a virtual unit meeting that I was hoping to not come to work the following day. I did the miles circuit for hours, and then we decided to have sex, which everyone said would start my labor. Well, on August 28th at 39 and 6, one day before my due date, I was getting ready for my last day of work when I got out of the shower, blew my nose, and felt a trickling sensation down my legs. My water broke at 5:21 a.m. Before I even moved, I called into work with a shaky, anxious voice, and my coworkers wished me luck. I put on some Free to Mom postpartum underwear because the fluid was continually leaking, but it didn't occur to me that they're just underwear, not an absorbent pad, so I had to change again right away. Then I calmly woke Shane up by saying I needed help with something. Not expecting it to be cleaning amniotic fluid off the bathroom floor and getting ready to have a baby, he asked, "What?" while still half asleep. I told him my water broke, and he hopped out of bed faster than I've ever seen. I always said it would be ideal to go into labor around 6 in the morning when our dog gets up for breakfast and after a good night of sleep. It seemed like I manifested the start of my labor. My original plan was to labor at home for as long as possible, but my amniotic fluid had a lot of meconium in it. I honestly didn't anticipate my water breaking first, let alone it being filled with meconium, so I didn't know what to do. Luckily, Shane was level-headed and said we should call the hospital. I called the number they gave me at my very first appointment and started talking really fast about how my water broke and meconium and what should I do. Then the woman responded with, "So you want me to transfer you to labor and delivery?" Apparently, I didn't have the direct number saved, and I had to share all the information again with the correct person. The nurse said we needed to come in for monitoring right away. This changed my birth plan, and I felt a little disappointed, but more importantly, we wanted to make sure the baby was okay. So we got cleaned up, packed the car, and sent our dog Nash to Grandma's. Of course, we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts for some breakfast on the way to the hospital. I then started having very mild contractions. We tried to time them on an app, but they were pretty infrequent, and I was too distracted to keep track. Once we got checked into the hospital, they hooked me up to monitoring where it showed our baby was doing great. They did a test to confirm it was amniotic fluid, although I was confident it was. This was quite a bit more uncomfortable than cervical checks for me, which the nurse seemed surprised by. They also checked my cervix, and I was 2 centimeters dilated. My contractions started to feel stronger, and I needed to breathe through them. The doctor met with me to discuss starting Pitocin, which I declined as I felt like I was progressing on my own. She also mentioned getting an epidural because she wanted me to be comfortable, despite telling her numerous times that my goal was to have a medication-free birth. I felt really good about speaking up for what I wanted my labor to look like. At this point, I really had to focus through the contractions, so we asked our doula, Briley, to meet us at the hospital. I wanted to be placed on wireless monitoring so I could get out of bed and keep labor progressing. Our nurse hooked me up to that. Just as Briley arrived to our room, I was swaying over the bed and feeling very nauseous. I did throw up, which our nurse assured us was a good sign of labor with all the hormonal changes. Briley took over with peppermint essential oils and cold washcloths, which really helped. Shane tried to eat lunch, but I yelled at him to take it somewhere else because the smell made me so nauseated. He ended up skipping food for the rest of the day. I noticed a bag of Pitocin in the room and felt frustrated when I asked the nurse why they'd have it ready when I explicitly said I didn't want it and felt like I was still progressing on my own. She said they give it after delivery to help the uterus contract to prevent excess bleeding. Around noon, I took a few laps through the halls, then spent a lot of time sitting on a peanut ball leaning over the bed. With each contraction, I could feel more amniotic fluid leaking out. They started to feel so strong that I noticed myself vocalizing through them. I was very proud that my body knew exactly what to do. Shane hooked me up to the TENS unit and Briley handed me the birth comb, which I squeezed so hard it left marks on my hands by the end of labor. It felt really good to have something in each hand to focus on during the contractions. Our doula also used a massage gun on my lower back and thighs, which provided more pain relief than I expected. I was so hot that I constantly needed a fan blowing on me too. People were trying to distract me with conversation during this time, but I wasn't in the mood to talk about anything other than what I needed in the moment. I wanted to solely focus on my labor. Briley suggested getting in the shower to switch things up and provide different relief. I was hesitant that it was too early to try hydrotherapy, but was feeling pretty uncomfortable and happy to do something new. The shower felt good on my back and belly, but once the tub was finally filled, I felt like I couldn't sit or lean back to enjoy it. I kneeled in the water and got on all fours during contractions. Briley was giving me hip squeezes, and Shane was spraying me with the hot water. We had such a good system going that I didn't want to leave the bathroom. I had a lot of bloody show during this time too. I didn't realize how much you bleed before the baby is actually born. I thought it mostly happened during the pushing phase, but it happens throughout dilation as blood vessels are breaking. Around 4 p.m., the wireless monitors weren't picking up well in the water, so the nurse had to Doppler the baby's heart rate frequently. Eventually, they needed to get me back to bed to get a better picture of what was going on. They tried to redo the wireless monitors, but it still didn't work correctly. They ended up just using the corded monitor, but I didn't care at that point. Laying in bed for 20 minutes was really difficult, especially because contractions felt like they were coming even more frequently. Once I was able to get up, I hung onto Shane's shoulders, swayed, and vocalized. I only pinched him too hard once. A different nurse was taking over at this time, and the first thing she did was look at my birth preference sheet and noted that the room wasn't dark or quiet like I wanted. Those intentions didn't even cross my mind this far into labor, but I really appreciated her efforts. One thing I wanted to note is that the OB was concerned that I was having slightly elevated blood pressure readings. Mind you, I'm in active labor at this point, and the only prior high reading was at my first OB appointment. My post-birth blood pressures were completely normal. Coping was becoming increasingly difficult. The nurse offered nitrous oxide, which I was open to trying. It took a while to set up, and I had to sign consent for it, which would probably be good to talk to your team about in advance if you want it. I used it through 2 contractions, but didn't notice a difference, and found it to be more uncomfortable to hold a mask to my face than to hold the comb. My IV needed to be replaced during this time, and the nurse did it flawlessly with my arm in the air, leaning on Shane, calmly swaying through contractions coming every 2 minutes. I've heard of women going into labor land to focus on getting through an unmedicated birth, but I was completely cognizant of everything going on around me. I was scared this meant I wasn't even in transition yet. I also never felt her drop down into my pelvis. I really wanted a cervical check to see where things were at, because I felt like I wouldn't be able to do this for another several hours. She checked me at 5 p.m., and without telling me, I was 9 centimeters dilated with a cervical lip. They asked if I felt pushy. I felt a lot of pressure, like I had to poop. I tried to sweet talk the nurses into letting me use the bathroom, but they said it was probably just the baby and wouldn't let me go. That was very smart in hindsight. All of a sudden, I heard myself starting to grunt during a contraction. I remember saying, "Did that sound like I was pushing?" I couldn't believe I was experiencing the fetal ejection reflex. We sat the bed up, I leaned over it on all fours, and the nurse checked my cervix one last time. I was complete and ready to get this baby out. Someone, I think my nurse, applied a warm compress to my perineum. They asked if I wanted to be coached through a few pushes, which I appreciated. I could feel that pushing while holding my breath was much more effective than when I was borderline screaming. After actively trying to push through a few contractions, the room started to fill with people and equipment. The OB wanted me to turn on my back, which I not so pleasantly declined. That was the one position I didn't want to push in. We compromised, and by 6 p.m., the nurses helped me lay on my side and held my legs up. Briley got the camera ready, and Shane stayed right next to me so I could squeeze his hand. I remember a specific moment where I felt so overwhelmed internally, but when I locked eyes with Shane, I just knew that everything was going to be okay. At 6:14 p.m., our baby was crowning, and I was asked again to turn on my back to deliver her, to which I responded with my first and only profanity, but reluctantly got into position anyway. I originally wanted to deliver on hands and knees and potentially help catch my own baby, but at this point that seemed way too complicated. I didn't feel the ring of fire that women talk about, but it was certainly the most uncomfortable I had been throughout the entire labor. I remember saying, "Oh, that feels so much better," when her head went back in. However, there was no time for breaks. It was time to meet our baby. They set up a mirror so I could see what was happening. I peeked my eyes open between pushes, and I could see her head. I didn't know this until I watched my birth video, but the OB was using her fingers to make space between the baby's head and my vagina. On the next push, her head crowned again, but stayed there. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. One more push, and her entire body came flying out. Sophie Grace was born on August 28th, 2025 at 6:19 p.m. The cord was wrapped around her neck, although the team worked so quickly to remove it that I didn't even know until I read through my birth notes and watched the video. They brought her right up to my chest, and we got to see our baby for the first time. She had dark hair, wide open eyes, and a strong cry. Her APGAR scores were 6 and 8. I was completely in shock that I just did that. I thought I felt tugging on the umbilical cord and asked the team to stop touching me, but it was Sophie kicking her feet against the cord. Shane then cut the umbilical cord, and the nurses briefly took her to the warmer. One push later, and I delivered the placenta. I didn't realize that after the baby is born, the contractions immediately stop, and I could just push out the placenta at any time. I had a first-degree internal tear that needed to be sutured. The OB asked if I wanted lidocaine prior. I didn't think about adding that to my birth preference sheet. They also started Pitocin after she was born to help my uterus contract. The OB then offered either a bedpan or catheter, both of which did not sound like good options. But the nurses spoke up and said they'd walk me to the bathroom. Luckily, I was the only patient in the birth center at this point, so all the incredible nurses were helping me out. They handed Sophie back to me for more snuggles, and shortly thereafter I handed her to Daddy for some skin-to-skin. The nurses showed me my placenta, which was so fascinating. Shane put Sophie back on my chest, and she immediately started doing the breast crawl. By 7 p.m., she was breastfeeding for the first time. For the next few hours, we just reflected on what happened and stared at our beautiful daughter. They took her measurements, and she weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces, and was 19.5 inches tall. The rest of the night was filled with adrenaline from the day's events. I took a shower and went to the bathroom like I didn't even just birth a baby. Briley bought us Jimmy John's, which had never tasted so good in my life. Sophie had a few lower temperatures, but doing skin-to-skin and keeping her bundled kept her from needing the warmer. Although I felt present for my entire labor and her birth, I didn't actually see her being born. Luckily, our doula recorded it, and I watched the video like 5 times that night. It was absolutely amazing to relive what my body was capable of and have such a special moment documented. Later, we tried to rest but didn't get much sleep. I brought a portable fan and the Hatch sound machine with us, which helped a bit. We had to stay in the hospital a second night for all of Sophie's 24-hour tests, and she passed them all. That second night, we enjoyed a steak celebration meal provided by the hospital. Our wonderful nurse offered to take Sophie to the nurse's station so we could rest for a little while. It was only about 2 hours before I had to feed her again, but it was the best sleep we'd get for a while. For the rest of our stay, the most pain I had was from the uncomfortable bed, not childbirth itself. It felt so good to have her in my arms rather than my belly. I was taking Tylenol and ibuprofen around the clock, as well as using ice packs and a waffle cushion. The next day, Saturday, August 30th, we were sent home for a sunny Labor Day weekend. Before we left, we met with a lactation consultant who gave me a few breastfeeding tips that worked really well, like lining my nipple up with her nose and putting her chin to my breast first. Then the nurse helped us learn how to buckle Sophie into her car seat and gave us lots of good advice. It felt surreal leaving the hospital with a newborn, but now it was time to figure out how to be parents and learn all about Sophie. Reminiscing about the last few days, I couldn't believe I had my dream uncomplicated, unmedicated birth. It was 13 hours of pure focus, excitement, distraction, and hard work. I highly recommend having a dedicated partner, shout out to Shane, and hiring a doula if you have similar goals. These two help make my dreams come true. Having time to reflect, I thought it was interesting the things I had on my birth plan versus what mattered to me in the moment. I completely left out calming music, a dark environment, and eating throughout labor without a second thought. Postpartum went pretty much as expected. Shane took 2 weeks off of work to help, and it felt like we barely had anything figured out by the time he had to return. We had to go back to the hospital for a Billy and weight check at 4 days old, but all her numbers looked good. Sophie and I quickly figured out breastfeeding, and my milk came in on day 4 when I noticed milk all over her lips after a feeding. That was really exciting to see. She had a shallow latch that caused a cracked nipple, which felt like it took forever to heal. I tried saline flushes, hydrogel patches, lanolin cream, and silverettes, all recommended by a lactation consultant. Ultimately, I just needed to give it time to heal. I now primarily pump and only breastfeed for comfort or convenience. I measured my nipples to see what flange size to use, but the lactation consultants actually recommended going down another 2 sizes. I'd suggest getting measured before you leave the hospital. I had several clogged ducts in the first few weeks as well. I started taking sunflower lecithin daily and haven't had any since. After I got those minor complications figured out, breastfeeding has been a breeze, and I don't even have to think about how to latch her anymore. I tried to do a modified 3-3-3 rule, but I was so antsy to get out of the house. We went on some walks, but I usually felt so much vaginal pressure by the end that I knew I was pushing my body too hard. Everything looked healed by my 6-week check, and my bleeding completely stopped around 7 weeks. Shane and I celebrated our 5-year wedding anniversary a week after we got home from the hospital with takeout from Texas Roadhouse. We have a picture of us eating our dinner on the couch while I was also breastfeeding Sophie. That felt empowering. It took time for Nash to adjust to Sophie. At first, he mostly left her alone, but would get up with us at all hours of the night and looked about as tired as we did. Now he loves giving her kisses and stealing her socks and toys. She smiles and screams out of excitement every time she sees him. It makes me so happy to see them becoming friends. Sophie came down with a cold early on when Shane went back to work, which worried me because I felt like every sick baby ended up in the hospital. But she handled it well and has already battled 2 more illnesses since starting daycare. Briley set up a meal train for us, and many people brought us food postpartum. Between that and the meal prep I did myself, I didn't have to cook for a full 2 months. On a side note, I read through my birth notes and noticed my delivering OB documented that I had an epidural. This error didn't really affect anything, but it was frustrating to see that in my chart when in reality I gave birth without it. I ended up reaching out to the records department and they modified it. I ultimately had the birth I always dreamed of, but I prefer to not have the same OB for a future birth. She was a locum, so hopefully that will be the case. Although the physical part of my postpartum experience went well, I had a harder time emotionally. The first 2 days in the hospital after giving birth felt joyous, and I was mesmerized by Sophie. The shock came when we got home, and I didn't feel connected to her at all. I could feel that I loved her immensely and that I would do anything for her, but I was worried I wasn't ready to be her mom and that we made the wrong decision to start our family. This was a heartbreaking feeling to have. I'd also like to say that throughout my entire pregnancy, labor, and postpartum, I was waiting for a problem. First, it was making sure I had a viable pregnancy, then ensuring the anatomy scan looked normal and passing the glucose test. Since my pregnancy went perfectly smooth, I thought there had to be a complication in labor. After my labor went as close to plan as possible, I thought postpartum would bring complications. My baseline anxiety and becoming a new mom had me convinced that something had to go wrong. I started an anti-anxiety medication because I was having some intrusive thoughts. If she didn't make a noise for a certain period of time, I was worried she stopped breathing and I'd get up to check on her. I could never shut my brain off when trying to sleep at night. I would fall asleep just in time for her to wake up for another feed. At one point, after an especially sleep-deprived week, I even had feelings of wanting to hurt her. That was really scary, but I shared those feelings with Shane and some friends, and coincidentally, she slept a long stretch the following night, which helped me catch up on my own sleep, and those thoughts went away. I didn't notice the sertraline making a difference, even after increasing the dosage, so I weaned off after about 2 months. I still feel anxious sometimes, but it doesn't interfere with my daily life. I also now realize that everything can go smoothly, and it's okay to just let good things happen without a repercussion. You don't have to wait for the other shoe to drop. I wish I could have told myself this a year ago. Becoming a mom was harder than I imagined. It was a complete lifestyle change, and I wasn't prepared for the sleep deprivation, a Velcro baby, a jealous dog, or the relationship changes with everyone around me. I questioned if we made the right choice, even though I have wanted to become a mom my whole life. I'm now almost 5 months postpartum, and things are much better. Sophie is smiling and laughing, which was much needed reassurance that I'm doing a good job. This has truly been the best month of my entire life, watching her learn, grow, and find joy in things. Spending a few hours away from her also helped my sanity. I waited 2 months to do so, but in hindsight, it would have been beneficial sooner. I felt like no one knew how to take care of Sophie as well as I did. My friends reminded me that, of course, I know her best, and always will, but it's okay to let someone else get to know and care for her as well. I have several friends who had babies months apart from me, and they have been instrumental to talk and relate to as well. I relied on advice from many moms who came before me, and it feels really special now that I'm able to give advice to the soon-to-be moms who will come after me. Overall, our family is doing great. We are so happy to be parents, and I'm figuring out this whole motherhood thing one day at a time. And that is the end of what I have written down.
All right. Yeah, you had it all written out there. And I really appreciate you sharing not only your birth story, but that postpartum experience as well. It made me think of that book, Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts, which hasn't been brought up in a while, but I know it's always relatable to hear people's postpartum experiences too.
I learned a lot from this experience, so I hope other moms can learn from what I had to share too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, speaking of what you've learned, any resources you want to share?
I mentioned most of my resources throughout, but I can't stress enough the importance of hiring a doula, listening to birth stories, and taking a birth course that fits your needs, like the Know Your Options birth course.
Awesome. Love to hear it when people enjoy the Know Your Options course. Thanks for sharing those things. We'll put them on the show notes. And then what's the best way for people to connect with you?
People can connect with me on Instagram. My username is Elizabeth Felons, or on TikTok at Felons Family.
All right, we'll put those in the show notes too. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to Elizabeth for sharing her birth story with us, and to Cozy Earth and Air Doctor for sponsoring this episode. Remember to use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR BOGO at cozyearth.com or BIRTHHOUR at airdoctorpro.com to get those discounts. I will link to those from the show notes as well as the podcast app where you're listening to this episode. You can find the show notes by going to thebirthhour.com and searching for Elizabeth's name in the search bar.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.